Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode with my co-host, Carrie Bennet. We are really enjoying giving you this show and talking about these topics that seem really complex so that we can help them be a little bit more understandable to the everyday person. I just wanted to remind you to head down into the show notes to make sure you get my free resources and Carrie's free resources. We've both spent a lot of time compiling our favorite list of products, as well as how you can actually implement a lot of these things into your daily life for free using our guides. We also both have amazing courses that you have access to in the show notes as well. And we co-host a course together called Quantum Fertility. We've actually had some quantum fertility babies just born this summer, and we have several quantum fertility pregnancies going on right now where women were told that they were not going to get pregnant, and we have been able to show them the way using these circadian principles and quantum biology, and we're so grateful for this. So make sure you head down to the show notes, check out those resources, check out those courses. And if you are enjoying the show, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, leave us a comment. And if you're listening on the podcast app, please head on over to Apple or Spotify, leave us up to a 5-star review. Since we are such a brand new show, we want to make sure that we're getting this message out to as many people as possible. Again, we want to make these concepts of quantum biology and circadian biology understandable and applicable to the everyday person. We want you to pull up a chair, come hang out, and enjoy this conversation with me and Carrie, and have a fantastic day. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Quantum Conversations with Sarah and Carrie. We're going to talk about food today. We're laughing because this is just such a hot topic of contention, and people have wars about it on social media. And I used to be in a certain diet camp, and now I've kind of expanded how I think about food. So I think it's a great topic for people to start to understand a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Same, right? Like I got a master's degree in clinical nutrition to think that was because I thought nutrition was the end all be all. And I recognize that it's not. But I also don't think that there are so many dogmatic approaches to nutrition. And I really think clinically, actually, all of them have a time and a place. It's just the time, the location, the place, right? The time and the place matter when it comes to what you eat. And I do feel like the when you eat matters even more, timing during the day. And I also feel like actually even more so than what and when you eat, it's can you actually digest and break down that food? I feel like digestive health is a whole nother topic we can go into at some point, right? That I think matters even more, because I could care less if you're keto or vegan. If you're not actually be able to break down that food, it's a non-issue at that point. So it's stressful no matter what. And so I think we should start by talking about how we view food and why we view food. And then let's go into like the good details about like, what do we do? Let's get into the nitty gritty of like, what do you eat? What do I eat? Look like? How do we get our food? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really great place to start because my view on food has changed tremendously over the years. I went from, when my daughter first had the autism diagnosis to that was the first time I ever thought food could actually influence behavior, could influence any of that stuff and health, period. So I went down the rabbit hole and went vegan. God bless. I went vegan for myself. She would not do vegan. She was only interested in really eating like grass-fed meat. And so I kind of did more of like a paleo style approach for her, specific carbohydrate diet, because I was reading that was going to be helpful for autism. But that was my first foray into nutrition. And so I just, at that point, 15 years ago, really dove into it with tons of self-study. And there's so much information out there that I think people almost get paralyzed by it. And it's easy too, because you've got people that just say a lot of things with authority. And there's this study and there's that study and there's this data and that data, and this helps this health condition. And so it can get so overwhelming. And so, and I was heavily into the carnivore diet and did that for a long time and started having issues with my thyroid and started having issues with my hormones, which everyone said, no, it's not going to happen. So finding quantum, community and this lifestyle was just like a breath of fresh air to me, because it's okay. Carnivore maybe makes a little bit more sense in wintertime, right? But it makes no sense in summertime. Carnivore maybe makes more sense if you're super leptin resistant, which no one ever talks about in these diet spaces as like leptin. No one talks about seasonality or deuterium or any of this stuff. So yeah, that was just a mouthful.
No, it's perfect, right? Because it makes sense. And, I do feel like the thing that happens, because so this is no judgment on people who really are dogmatic about eating. This is the way. It's because most people have had a healing experience of some sort. But what I see clinically is that a healing experience, someone could go vegan, someone could go keto, someone could go carnivore, someone could go paleo, AIP paleo, right?
Yep.
You could go any way, that you could switch anyway. I see clinically about a year, people feel really, really good. But then at that year mark, staying on the exact same nutrition plan, day in and day out, season in and season out, I feel like that's when it starts to create either nutrient deficiencies or a dysregulation of some sort in hormones. And I feel like I haven't seen that with coaching seasonal eating in people at all. And it's really, really refreshing to see.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what happened with me in carnivore. Like that first year, amazing. I mean, lost inflammation, reversed all kinds of IBS and digestive issues and skin issues. And I was like, this is just the best thing I've ever found in my life. It was at that 1 year mark that I was like, oh, I haven't got my cycle in a while. I'm having to be so much more restrictive just to like maintain my weight, because I didn't know my thyroid was like trudging downward, and I see that with a lot of people. They have great results, but then they just keep hanging on to it because they think that they're going to do it harder or more strict or better and get those results that they had in year 1 and year 2. And it doesn't always work that way. Usually not at all.
No, exactly. That was me with intermittent fasting. It felt great skipping breakfast for about 6 months. Probably longer than that, about 6 to even 8 months, I would say. I felt great skipping breakfast. And then it was like, where's my energy? Why do I have crazy, mood swings, or like, all the things that happen that I experienced with adrenal fatigue? Why did my adrenals crash?
Right.
So yeah, like that's just it. So I think I do want to kind of honor the fact that these different nutrition plans can serve a therapeutic purpose, because like you, I have seen carnivore be very beneficial for UC or Crohn's or IBS, things like that. But at some point you have to ask yourself, okay, ultimately, what is food, and how would I be getting food if it was up to me and my own accord? And the answer to me with that is twofold. Food is a signature. It's information about my environment. That information can be the season, that information can be light information about my environment. And how I would have gotten it was I'd have to hunt it, gather it, or grow it. And so I think really the way we look at food is from that perspective. Food is information, and procuring food in an ideal situation means we're in tune with what's seasonally and locally available.
Exactly. I think that's a hard one for people because we're so disconnected from what the heck is seasonal and what is local. Like, what does that even mean? I mean, I live in a big city, and so there's not like a bunch of farms near me. There are actually, I'm in Georgia. So if I go outside the city, there's tons of farms. I didn't know that until I started trying to do this. And so, yeah, there's farmers markets. But if I want to go to an actual farm, I just have to get in my car and go a little bit. But as a person who lives in a city and has for their entire life, I mean, I just never had any awareness of a banana is probably like never actually in season in Georgia.
Definitely not in Michigan.
I don't think there's a lot of banana trees in Georgia. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure someone in the comments will. But we do have tons of apple trees. We have apple orchards here in Georgia, apple picking season. So
we have peaches up here. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
In Michigan, yeah.
We've got tons of those in Georgia.
Yeah,
obviously,
I know you got tons of
the
those.
Georgia peaches. But yeah, I mean, we just don't think about food in that term of like, it's December. So should I really be having this tropical pineapple fruit smoothie in December to do this, or January to do this New Year's smoothie cleanse? Like that's
right.
Which I did, as a yoga teacher, was like always doing some new juice or smoothie cleanse. Like, let's get the acai berries or the sprouts or this or that and the other. Like, doesn't matter if it's the dead of freaking winter,
Right.
Let's pour on the tropical fruit. But now it's like food carries this, like you said, a signature. It's light code. And we always say in kind of this quantum space, like food is light. It carries the light code of where you live and what time of year it is. And so what kind of signal are you sending your body if you're having a tropical fruit smoothie in the dead of winter, right? Like
absolutely. No, it's this mindset switch of I need to get all these vitamins and minerals and nutrients from my food to I need to tie in the food to the light environment that I'm currently in. And I just feel like this is a really key thing, right? Because for me, right, in March, January, February, like winter into early spring, there is next to nothing available that would grow that's fruits and vegetables, because the light is not intense enough yet.
Right.
You have to have intense enough light, mostly in the UV spectrum, but it has to be intense enough in order to do something called split water in a chloroplast to create photosynthesis, right? That's how plants grow, through photosynthesis. And that's how they can grow and then harvest the energy from the sun to eventually develop a fruit or a vegetable. And so that requires intense enough light. So if you're living at the equator, you are going to have that intense light year round. There's very little change in the light. Now there's sometimes changes in a dry season versus a wet season. So there could still be changes in food availability at the equator. But me at the 42nd latitude, the first thing that I am going to be able to find are dandelion greens, frankly, right? Which sounds weird, right? But I've added them to my nutrition. And how did I go about this, right? How did I figure this out? I bought a couple of books that were called Midwest Foraging, or Foraging in Michigan. And it was like, okay, if I were to have to go out today into the woods and find something to eat, what could I find right now? Well, there's different types of greens. There's early in spring. There are spring onions. There are asparagus, right? So there are things, but it's limited, right? There's maybe in early spring 4 to 5 different things that would grow in the lower light environment. But if you go to a farmer's market, you'll see more and more and more things become available as you reach the height of summer, because the sunlight gets more and more intense.
Yeah.
And so one of the best things I figured out was not only getting those foraging books. It was very helpful, but also then and this is at least in the United States. So I have not looked internationally, but in the United States, there is one college or university really responsible for agriculture and monitoring things like soil status and what food would be growing seasonally for the farmers to know. And so here it's Michigan State University. They have this beautiful calendar that you can print that I've printed off, and I've shown it in a couple of different ways on Instagram and also in my community, where it's like, okay, if I'm eating in March, this is what would be available. If I'm eating in April, and so you could find a checklist of things like that. And so one of the best things you can do to start this idea is to familiarize yourself with what is even growing in your local environment at given times throughout the year. And that'll give you a really good idea then, should you choose to go to a farmer's market, about what then you are going to key in on to purchase, because that food was grown with your light environment. And that light actually gets captured into electrons in the food. And then we eat the food and we release the light inside of us. And that plays a role in terms of the health of our mitochondria, or the work or the electron tunneling through our mitochondria. It all ties together.
Yep, it does. And that's what we always say, like it's called the electron transport chain, not the calorie transport chain or the carbohydrate transport chain or the fat transport chain. It's not this myopic thing that people make it out to be. And people get so caught up in different ideologies, because they can have powerful anecdotal stories. And I'm not saying that they're not real of healing through different nutritional models, but we have to think about what's long-term and what's sustainable for our lifetime. Because I don't know about you, but I just got to this point, especially after doing carnivore for a couple of years. I'm like, I don't want to just have to like identify myself by a diet. I don't want to be hopping on to the new diet trend, because I've done that my whole entire 44 years of being alive, of like, let's do this diet. Let's, like I've just done that so many times. I don't want to do that anymore. And so kind of finding this whole quantum piece has been such a relief, because I don't have to subscribe to any ideologies. I can just say, oh, it's June the 13th. I wonder what is available in my latitude right now. What makes sense for me to be eating right now, rather than like, let me go on this diet website and like, see if I can follow it perfectly,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also eliminates boredom too, because when I was trying to do, I never went full carnivore, but when I was trying to do ketosis, extended ketosis, even more like the autoimmune paleo, when I was trying to do those sorts of things, I feel like it got too regimented and it's too boring. And this is almost exciting. It's like, let's go to the farmer's market and let's see what's available. And I'm not in a small town. I'm in a smaller community, right? There's probably only 100,000 people that live here. So it is smaller, but still, regardless of whether you're in a big city or a smaller area, I'm going to guarantee you there's always farmers markets available. And if there's not, contact farms, because oftentimes they have what's called a CSA program, which is community supported agriculture, where they basically will curate their produce or their meat products as well. Sometimes that they have that available. And then there's a pickup place for you to go every single week to get your stuff. So, once you understand that food is a representation of your environment, and it goes beyond that. What's fascinating to me even is the study of polyphenols in different plants how eating those is UV protective, right? How it changes how it helps you receive the stronger and stronger sunlight. And so if you just are interested in hearing a more refreshing perspective and what I find to be a freeing perspective, this might be what you want to explore, because it truly gets you in touch with your environment in a way that I never thought was possible. In the same way where I was like, I never really realized how the sunrise, where I would be gazing at sunrise, changed throughout the year.
Right.
Right. Like little things like that, where you're just like, oh, I kind of just assumed I'd look east and the sun would rise. It's like, no, sunrise is here. Then right. And then it goes back. Right. And so just little things like that I think are so cool to kind of just get in touch with, right. And just understand. So I really encourage people to start. And here's where Sarah and I are going to maybe ruffle some feathers too, because I know in the diet world, it's really, a lot of people are perfectionists. We're not perfectionists when it comes to this stuff.
No, we see nuance as well. We see nuance for different people, for different medical situations, for different situations with their health. I mean, as Carrie mentioned, carnivore can be amazing for specific health conditions, absolutely. Same thing with a ketogenic diet. Absolutely great for specific medical conditions. But even within those, I have people it's been cool to have a platform and to kind of be talking about this thing, because nutrition in this way, because now I'm having people that maybe they have suffered from specific health conditions. There's a lady, I'm going to bring her on my podcast. It might even air before this comes out, but she did a ketogenic diet because she had really bad epilepsy. She started having grand mal seizures when she was 12. And which is terrifying. It's a terrifying thing to have to go through. And so she started, I think she was in her maybe early 30s doing a ketogenic diet, because she was on these seizure medications, which are horrible. Like they cause all kinds of health conditions, pancreatitis and excessive weight gain. And I mean, they really are very stressful on your body's organ systems. And so she just didn't want to be on all this medication anymore. Found a ketogenic diet, lost 80 pounds, wasn't trying to lose 80 pounds, but lost 80 pounds, and then put her epilepsy completely in remission and lowered all of her medications. So she's doing great, right? But then year, 4, 5, she started noticing like her hormones and her thyroid
we're not optimal, and she's having thyroid problems and hormone problems. And she's like, yeah, but all these experts say it's okay for me to do this long term. So she's been experimenting for the last, I want to say 6-8 months now, with just doing some carb cycling. And she's doing it with local seasonal foods, kind of the way that I had encouraged her to do. And she's had no return of epilepsy.
Wow.
She hasn't gained any of the weight back. The epilepsy hasn't come back. She's just doing it light code, right? In her local environment, just popping in the carbs with her cycle strategically. And she's stayed completely in remission. So even with these extreme health conditions, I think that they can get a lot of resolve and support through these dietary strategies. I think we still have to look at the impact that some of these do have on the thyroid and sex hormones and all of that, and not be so terrified of, adding in something local and seasonal. And in the winter months, looking at the more kind of like cellar stable foods to help with that thyroid and hormone issue.
Exactly. And I also just tying that into the idea of that people also have to recognize that when they talk about gut health, and we know the gut microbiome plays a huge role in that, but the gut microbiome is responsive to our light environment, our seasonal changes are, so even our diurnal changes, but the seasonal changes too. So that means that even if you may have had an issue with plant fibers in the past, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have an issue forever. When you get your circadian rhythm intact, and perhaps when you do lower that initial burden of inflammation, like we do, like I see with UC or Crohn's, you can start to experiment with it, because your microbiome is going to respond to the light that you're getting, meaning that then it expects you to maybe eat some more produce, and it will be ready then to digest those fibers without creating a flare up. So it's just a different way, I think, of looking at things. And I don't know, I like it. I found it to be freeing more than anything.
Yeah, I do too, completely. So that comes to the question of like, how do you eat? How do you make that work for your family, Carrie?
Listen, my kids, I don't force this on them, right? I've got young children, he's not 2 anymore. Gosh, he just turned 4 through 11. sorry, Jack, you're a 4-year-old. 4 through 11. So, so with my kids, do we try to eat pesticide free? Yes, absolutely. That's a whole nother topic we can go into if we want to. But I really, and we listen, we try to curate good quality food, right? And so I let them eat fruit in the middle of winter if their body is asking them for fruit in the middle of winter. That's not something where I'm going to, be like, oh no, don't do that. But I personally don't crave fruit in the middle of winter. So what I do for myself is different than what I do for my family. I want them to eat clean and pesticide free, if I could just kind of give 2 words to describe it. I, on the other hand, always focus, my first meal of the day is still very much a meal that it maintains leptin sensitivity. I still feel so good with a really protein rich, fat to satiety style breakfast that's very, very low carb, if not 0 carb. That feels so good and so satiating to me. And so I don't change that. And year round, I can always find animal protein, right? Plus fat, plus animal fat. And so sometimes it's eggs and butter. Sometimes it's kielbasa that we get from the farmer's market. Sometimes it's ground beef with some spices. Sometimes it's some salmon or some tuna with a little bit of like some avocado oil mayo or something like that. But typically that's how my breakfast looks. And it is 9 times out of 10 with some form of meat or animal product that we've gotten from the farmer's market. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I do have a baby. He's 8 months and he just started eating food. So
yeah, your demand for calories and nutrients is higher right now.
Totally. Breastfeeding has completely changed how I eat, because I have found that if I try to take the carbs too low, that I lose supply. And I'm like,
Sure.
right now, I would like to knock off a little bit of weight and do a little bit of keto, but I'm not gonna be able to feed my son if I do that. So I still keep to the basically zero carb breakfast, with a good protein and fat, mineral rich water every morning. And I've kept that through my whole pregnancy, postpartum. That's just literally, like you said, it's how I feel my best and maintain that leptin sensitivity. But if when I do have carbohydrates, I time them more towards the middle of the day. I find that works best for me, especially being like, I'm in kind of a different spot than most people because I'm 44 and I'm postpartum. So it's kind of like we're doing postpartum and perimenopause at the same time. Really, we're doing this. And, as we get a little bit older, we are a little bit less carb tolerant. We do have an issue with insulin sensitivity. And so I prefer to time my carbs in the middle of the day. So that maybe looks like potatoes at the end of the meal, or like right now, cherries are in season and I'm loving the heck out of some cherries. Put them in the freezer. So have those, nice serving of cherries after lunch. But that's really the way and then dinner is more of a lower carb meal again. So I still, I don't by any means, some people think like, well, she quit carnivore. Now she's doing a high carb diet. Like, no, I never really have. And that's pretty much kind of what I did in pregnancy too. I listened to my body a little bit more. But now just to keep my milk supply where it needs to be, I do have like potatoes, try to do seasonal fruit. It's summertime. So we've got some really good ones right now. But just because of my age, I do try to still keep the carbs towards the middle of the day. And then evening again is like a low carb meal. And I still really don't snack. I did during pregnancy. That's a totally different animal. But yeah, I mean, the basis of my diet is still a lot of animal foods, still high quality protein. We do a lot of wild salmon, sardines, oysters when we can get them. Like we do a lot of wild seafood, probably 4 or 5 meals a week are wild seafood here. The baby loves wild salmon. I feed him, like people are like, what the heck are you feeding this to your baby? Like he has never wanted any of the purees. I did try a couple, he hates them. So I'll buy a rack of lamb and put the rack of lamb in the Instant Pot and give that to him and give him little bits of potato and give him little bits of green beans. Like that's what he likes. He likes fish. He likes beef. He likes lamb.
My kids loved egg yolks.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, just people food, simple. Yeah. And, my daughter, we do have her on a ketogenic style diet right now because she is dealing with some different health issues. And that is really how she does her best. And so, yeah, I don't give her, I have like my fruit has to stay outside in a different freezer because she'll go and get it. But yeah, I mean, I keep her on a lot of high fat kind of meat-based type of a diet too. So it's still very much of an animal-based diet that I do and I think is really healthy, but shoot, I mean, it's June, March, April, May, I started craving greens and salads this year. I
did too. I did not crave a dang salad all winter long until like the end of March hit, like beginning of April. And I'm like, yes, get me some salad. It was so weird. It's so weird, but it makes sense. It's not weird when you actually look at the fact that, wait, my eyes are recognizing that would be available in my environment. And maybe there's a nutrient or something in there that my body is really asking for.
Exactly. And I think like, in the carnivore community and animal-based community, people freak out about things like oxalates and, all these anti-nutrients and this, that, and there can be some people that, and it is, there's the gut should be able to deal with oxalates, right? I think what happens is that people eat high oxalate foods like spinach in amounts they shouldn't be eating, and they eat them all year round. They eat, things like almonds. You shouldn't be eating almonds year round, and you shouldn't be eating almond butter and like handfuls of almond
flour is the one too that I see. Right. It's like, right. It's
in nature. We never would have had access like that ever.
No, exactly.
And so I think that, certain people that maybe have these genetic predispositions to not be able to tolerate oxalates should probably avoid them. But they're not going to be readily available year round. There's a small season where these things are available. And if you just eat them when they're in season, I wonder if they would be such an issue.
Especially if you have a strong circadian rhythm, which is what helps repair damage to the gut, right? So people who were eating those, like you said, it was available for a short window of time, but they also couldn't help 3,000 years ago having a strong circadian rhythm so that their body within 24 to 48 hours would repair any of that gut lining damage. But one of the things that, one of my clients that I can think of, who she was shocked that her iron numbers went so low and she was having gut issues, was a client who was taking handfuls of spinach and throwing them in a smoothie every single morning, right? And she was like, well, I thought I was getting iron. I can't give blood now. My iron count's too low and my gut's all messed up. And it's just like, that's because we have this misconception, right? It's just a misconception. She thought she was doing well. But like you said, those things only become a huge issue that I've seen when they're way overconsumed, and especially out of season.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think just this whole conversation about seasonality and then leptin sensitivity as well. If someone is very leptin resistant, they probably shouldn't be having tons of fruit and they probably shouldn't be having tons of potatoes. Or if they do, maybe you have it on a carb cycle day once a week or strategically through the month.
Let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Because that carb cycle thing, I think the carb cycling, throws people off this idea of carb cycling. And I think it's important to recognize that clinically carb cycling can be, I've seen it as a very beautiful way to support thyroid and adrenal health when also supporting leptin levels or maybe looking to go more into ketosis. So for example, I go more into ketosis in the winter months because my food availability in Michigan for fruits and vegetables is close to zero, right? But when I do carb up, I carb up with, like you said, cellar stable things. So root vegetables, apples last a long time as well. We got tons of local apples here in the fall. So carb up days can really matter. And that carb up day is when you would take whatever number of carbohydrates you're at, which if you are looking to be in therapeutic ketosis or improve leptin sensitivity, needs to be low for chunks of time, right? For chunks of time to help to regulate that. But then you pick one day, typically a week, sometimes more frequently, sometimes less. And Sarah and I can kind of go into the nuance of that you're going to eat a substantially more carbohydrates, but it's by no means I'm gorging on 400 grams of carbohydrate type situation.
No, definitely not. Yeah, that's definitely a good distinction because I think people hear that and they think, oh, I'm going to go to the ice cream shop and
free for all
get whatever I want, and live your life. Like, I think every now and then, if you want to go have an ice cream or have a piece of cake and I do too. And if it doesn't send you into a downward spiral, there was a time in my life where I couldn't do that because I'd have a slice of cake and then I'd want a slice of cake every day for a month and it would turn into this binge cycle. Since I started this circadian lifestyle, my neurotransmitters have so much support from morning light, which is something, I was on antidepressants from the age of 14 to 35. I've struggled a ton with my mental health. I still don't touch alcohol. I have 7 years sober from alcohol and had to get help to stop drinking. So I don't care how much neurotransmitter support I have.
That's a hard no.
I'm just going to not open that door. I just feel best with it shut. But having a slice of cake, I never thought that would be all right. I thought it was the same thing as alcohol. I found that I can have the cake or have the ice cream and then go back on my merry way and be fine. But that's not what we mean by carb cycling. We mean 5 days a week, your ketosis, if you're trying to improve leptin sensitivity or if you're working on a health condition, maybe pick Saturday and then at lunch, have a baked potato, have some fruit, and then if you still want a little bit at dinner, have a little bit at dinner. And what I tell people, and I don't know about you, Carrie, because they're like, how do I know it's time for me to have a carb up day? And I'm like, when your sleep starts to suffer, that's typically when I'll say, if you are having if you're doing ketosis and you're all of a sudden having a lot of interrupted sleep, try a carb up day. And then if you're still having the same issue that night, have one more carb up day. And then if it continues, then we need to look deeper. Right. But a lot of times people will have that one carb up day and then sleep well, and then they can go back into ketosis the next day. do another 5-6 days. And that tends to work really well for people.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. That's the quality of sleep can be important. Or I also, for some people, it is more of a feeling of on edge, or maybe anxiety ramping up just a little bit, stress. Adrenaline-y type stuff as well, to look for. And so that I do find that some people for the first 3 weeks or more, they can be in strict ketosis, 6 weeks, strict ketosis, strict carnivore, strict leptin, right? Support way to support leptin levels. But there does come a time, right? There does come a time where it's going to be important to recognize your body's cues for when it does need more carbohydrates. And then when you are leptin sensitive, I am leptin sensitive, Sarah is leptin sensitive. When you're leptin sensitive, that's when the seasonal carbs, even on a daily basis, in the amounts that we're talking about, are okay, right? It's like, I still do my 0 carb, high protein breakfast, but I'm going to have local seasonal carbohydrates with lunch, with dinner. Dinner for me is a very small meal these days, right? I'm not hungry in the afternoon. But that's where it's like, and then, those carbohydrates too, towards the winter, they go away more. And, your body then, it's kind of like this, like a grander cycle on a yearly basis. And then the cycling within the season too, depending on where your leptin is at, depending on what your goals are for body fat, the body weight, those sorts of things. That just, I hope people are kind of getting that it's not just, here's your protocol, stick to it for the rest of your life and never change it up. Because that's not really, it doesn't work in clinical practice that way.
No. And it's funny, when I was doing carnivore in the very beginning, I would do really well for about 3 weeks, And then I would just the binges I would go on. I don't even think it was like a binge, but I would go eat 5 Lara bars.
Right.
Gross. But I would get to that point after about 3 weeks where my body would just be like, I don't care what it is, Lara bars, whatever you can find that's got some sugar in it, eat it. You got to have it. And that would always be coinciding with, that's the week before my cycle. And I see that happening with a lot of women. They can do great with keto and carnivore, the first part of their cycle, but then they really just struggle that latter half. And some people say, oh, just eat more fat, up your electrolytes. But I'm like, why not just have a friggin' sweet potato? Or an apple, or,
the goal is metabolic flexibility. The goal is to burn glucose well and burn fat well, and to be able to flip that switch back and forth. So this idea that if you have sweet potatoes for 5 days in a row, all of a sudden it's going to be horrible for you is just something that I think we really got to break that mindset, because sometimes it's needed. And when you're metabolically flexible, you can do that.
Right. You can switch in and out. Yeah. Our bodies, people are like, glucose is our preferred fuel source. No, ketones are the preferred fuel source. And this is the preferred, actually we're supposed to be able to burn both, honestly. And if 100%. If you are leptin resistant, if you have extra body fat, you can burn your own body fat for fuel. You can, and you should be able to do that in order to improve leptin sensitivity. Do you need to do that 365 days a year? No, but you still need to be able to burn glucose on occasion and then jump back into ketosis. Because I see that people that try to just stay 365 days a year in ketosis and never ever burn glucose, they end up having this kind of physiological insulin resistance, which happened to me, where I'd test my blood sugar fasted in the morning and I'd be in the low 100s, that pre-diabetic range. And you're like, oh, it's the dawn effect, or, oh, it doesn't matter. And you're in ketosis, so it's okay. It's your blood sugar numbers should never be in a pre-diabetic range. I don't care what your diet is, your diet doesn't excuse you from having wonky blood sugar numbers.
It poses the question. People have to ask the question, why is this happening? As opposed to oh, no big deal. My keto numbers are fine. So it's not a big deal.
Right. Exactly. And it really does happen for a lot of people. Yep. And there's all kinds of blogs and stuff out there that just tell people it's fine and it's okay and go on your way. But when I was in that situation, I was also struggling with weight loss resistance. I had kind of become leptin resistant again, even though I had eliminated carbs and I wasn't eating any sugar. I'd kind of fallen back into being leptin resistant. My blood sugar numbers were pre-diabetic and I didn't feel good. And I did feel that required, kind of tired, stressy type of feeling. And here's the thing, like the answer is not to jump to the freaking other end of the pool and go 300, 400 grams of carbs a day and eat 6 times a day. Cause that's what people interpret that and say, oh, I got to jump the other way. That's not, rarely have I seen that be a good solution for someone. What again, that might look like is teaching your body again to become metabolically flexible and adding in some root vegetables or adding in some seasonal fruit, a couple of days a week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. That I had a very similar experience when I did ketosis and intermittent fasting for way too long for my body. It was, I felt so, the thing that I remember was I startled easily, like on edge, right? Like, it's like loud noise, like you get that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
So it was such an enhanced adrenaline rush, it felt like to me. And I wish I would have known at the time, had I just recognize that this was my body kind of running out in a stress. This became a stressor for my body.
Yeah.
This way of eating became a stress for my body. Had I adjusted some things, including a carb up day, periodically, that would have actually abated that completely, which is what I do now. And so I hope this encourages people, like you said, not to say, ketosis doesn't work for me.
Right.
Maybe it does, or carnivore doesn't work for me. I have to find something completely different. I hope this encourages people to say it works, but it needs a tweak here. We have to still maintain that metabolic flexibility. And I don't think people are very aware. I guess they are, because you're right, blogs about it coming out now, but people are on a whole not as much aware of the fact that you can be in ketosis for too long and actually also then develop, like you said, insulin resistance or poor blood sugar regulation because of it. And that can be helped by recognizing that your body, how long your body does well in ketosis, or how long your body does well on carnivore, and adding in these carb up days to kind of support the body's metabolic flexibility.
Exactly. And then the thing is, if you're leptin sensitive or if you're underweight, then you probably don't need to be worrying about being on a low carb diet or carnivore or keto or any of that. Just eat seasonally, locally. And if it's wintertime, go for the more cellar stable type of produce, the root vegetables, potatoes, squash, those types of things, eat those. No one is saying you have to do keto or carnivore. We're just saying like 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy. At least these days. At least, and probably more than that. And so a lot of people should really consider maybe looking at some of these approaches as a strategy to help reverse out of those conditions, and to do that with nuance.
And even if you feel great on the way that you're currently eating, I still find it so cool to start to recognize and become more in touch with what's available seasonally and locally. It's just, I just find it just such a mentally supportive way of eating as well, to be like, oh, this is what grows now. How cool, right? Apples need this amount of sunlight, okay, they're not available to this time of the year. I just find it I'm a nerd though, but I find it very fascinating and interesting to know that about my environment.
Exactly. I love it. All right. Well, I think this has been a great conversation, and I'm excited to come back next week and chat some more.
Same.